So it's Thursday, December 9th, 2021, and call this Lacey City Council work session to order. We do have one amendment to the agenda. At the end of the agenda, we will add a discussion from our city manager about a position that needs to be added to the city of Lacey. With that, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? And that motion unanimously carries. And first up on our agenda is together is, can we bring Megan in? Is she in the audience here? There you are. You could turn on your video and unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay, great. And we have sharing ability as well. Great. One second, I'm just changing my name on here. I just couldn't see that until. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Megan Darrow, and I am the Executive Director of Together. I use she, her pronouns. I wanted first to thank the city of Lacey, of course, for having us tonight, but also for your long-term partnership and support for our programs in Lacey. Currently, we have a relationship around our clubhouse program, which is before, after, and summer program in 4 schools in the North Thurston Public School District. So thank you all for the long-term commitment and partnership. So today we're here to talk about our host homes pilot program and to make a request of support to the city of Lacey. And I have Gabby Heyer here, who is our program development director of the host homes program. And she'll be doing the bulk of the presentation, but I'm going to kick it off by telling you a little bit about what Together's been up to in case you are new to our organization. So Together is a nonprofit working here in Thurston County, and our mission is to advance the health and well-being of all young people. And we do this with 3 core values: equity, mobilization, and systems change. Those are the core pieces of our work. Our organization has been in existence for over 30 years. And Cynthia Pratt was a long time serving board member. Hi, Cynthia, nice to see you. And we currently do work very similar to what we have always done in supporting youth really through partnerships in schools. And I'll talk about the 3 buckets and then hand it over to Gabby. So currently in Thurston County, one program we have is Clubhouse, and you all may be familiar with Clubhouse. Clubhouse is our after school, before school, and summer program in 4 schools in North Thurston Public School. We serve Chinook and Nisqually Middle Schools and Lydia Hawk and Pleasant Glade Elementary Schools. We serve about 200 students per year through those programs on a referral basis. It's a completely free program, includes food, transportation to and from programs, enrichment, academic support, and now also bilingual programming in Spanish at Chinook and Lydia Hawk Elementary School. We've been running that program in North Thurston for 7 years. It's funded through, of course, with your support, but the primary funding comes from the state, from OSPI, and which is funding from the Fed's Department of Education. The point is to go into schools that have a large percentage of students who are struggling in school, maybe attendance, academics, or socially. So that's the primary focus. It's very targeted, and students have to commit, and families have to commit to coming a certain amount of days per year. The other body of work that we do is called the Community Schools Program, which places case managers into school buildings, Currently, we have partnerships with Olympia and Tumwater School District, and that work looks at removing barriers for students and families to fully engage in schools. And then the last bucket is a brand new evolution of our work. We're really excited, called Host Homes, which Gabby will talk about in depth. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit and kind of tee up how we came to do this work. In the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, Together's really been doing a lot of internal work to become more client-centered, and we've evolved a lot in the past 10 years. We started with a remission and a revision of our work. We really moved away from a punitive view of youth behavior and adopted some best practice models around partnering with schools, also best practice models around centering equity and justice in our mission. And just like the city of Lacey, we stand in solidarity with communities of color, and we really aim in all of our programs to center equity and justice. In that revisioning of our work, we really started to see some key needs in the community that Together was doing mobilization around, specifically in Tumwater around youth homelessness and a specific group of young people that are named unaccompanied youth. Unaccompanied youth are students who find themselves homeless without a guardian. And in the landscape of services in Thurston County, they're really a population that is hard to serve. We started conversations in Tumwater about possibly serving that specific community, and it evolved into a broader community conversation that then started to include the North Thurston Education Foundation and Lacey Rotary, who were also interested in developing a program to meet the specific needs of those youth. We vetted over 2 years what organization would be the best suited to take on the host model that the community really thought would serve the needs. We worked with Community Youth Services, Family Education Support Services, Family Support Center to really find who could best take on such a program. And Together was asked to take the lead. So that's where we are today. We've been through a 1-year planning process funded by the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound, and now we're here. And I'm happy to introduce to you Gabby Heyer, who has been in the development phase of this program for the last 9 months. So she can talk to you more about who unaccompanied youth are and what the program entails. Gabby?
Thank you, Megan. And thank you very much for having us here this evening for learning with us and growing with us and dreaming with us. My name is Gabby Heyer, and as Megan mentioned, I am the Program Development Director. And we begin with, again, discussing or identifying who are unaccompanied youth. For the purposes of this project, this program, we are going to be serving youth ages 13 through 21. But by definition, as Megan mentioned, unaccompanied youth are minor youth who are not accompanied or not under the care of a parent or a guardian and unsheltered or unstably housed. As this slide mentions, reasons why youth leave: conflict, they either leave or are forced to leave their homes due to conflict, family conflict, parental abuse, neglect, parental mental health issues and substance use, or possibly forced to leave their home after they divulge a pregnancy or they identify as LGBTQ plus to a parent or guardian, as well as deceased parents. And I won't read through all the slides, but I just want to bring attention to this one, just to give you an idea of who the youth are and why it is that they find themselves in the circumstance of being unhoused or unstably housed. Now, across the United States, 1 in 30 youth ages 13 through 17 experience homelessness over a period of 12 months. That is 700,000 youth across the United States, and this is minor youth. National, again, across the United States, 4.2 million youth, that's young adults and minor youth experience houselessness or housing instability. And statewide in the state of Washington, a year, 13 to 15,000 youth, minor youth, unaccompanied youth. Now I want to bring attention to Thurston County, specifically North Thurston Public Schools. 2021, school year 2020-2021, there were 552 students identified as McKinney-Vento students. That is, there were 118 students that were identified as unaccompanied minor youth. And in 2021, this school year to present date, we just started the school year in September, we're possibly midway. There have been 216 students identified as McKinney-Vento, and we're looking at 54 students at present time being unaccompanied youth. So that begins to paint a picture of the need within our own community. It's not something that is happening in isolated instances. It's across the United States, and more specifically here in our own community. Now, these unhoused youth are less likely to finish their schooling and less likely than their peers that are housed to finish their schooling. According to a report to the legislature in 2019, the number of students experiencing houselessness has increased over the years. This increase may be due to the quality and data that the schools, the school districts are reporting and collecting. And what we do know is that there may be an impact due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the end to the eviction moratorium. We don't know what that looks like right now, but that will most likely influence what this looks like in the upcoming year or years. It is important to acknowledge that some youth and young adults are at greater risk for experiencing houselessness. Youth who do not complete a high school education, whether it's high school diploma or a GED, are at a significantly higher risk of experiencing homelessness than peers who earn a diploma. Nationwide, 30 to 40% of youth experiencing homelessness are LGBTQ plus youth and BIPOC youth, who are also more than twice as likely to be houseless than their peers who are cisgender or heterosexual. In addition, 30 to 56% of youth who have experienced with out-of-home placements, such as foster care, also report to have experienced houselessness or homelessness, which is why it's important to intervene now with youth, specifically youth-centered programs, giving youth choice to disrupt that cycle of homelessness and prevent chronic homelessness. Which brings us to the pilot program, the model. This program is essentially going to match youth and young adults with community partners, whether the youth are already in a relationship, a kin relationship. They may know the individual, teacher, coach, someone that they already have a relationship with, or a community member, which community members have already stepped forward, interested in learning more and how to get involved. Now, this program has been replicated across the United States. It is not a new program. It's been around since, at least as we know it, since the 1970s, originating in Minnesota as a need, or to address the need of youth, LGBTQ plus youth who were experiencing houselessness. In the state of Washington, there are currently about 11 to 12 programs. We're talking Ryan's House in Whidbey Island, Cocoon in Everett, the Yes Teen in Colville County, Washington, and the closest one, the Mason County Host in Shelton. There is also a program in King County, the Greater Seattle YMCA King County host. And we've been collaboratively discussing this particular project with these programs. Now, it is the Host Homes program is community-based, a community-driven approach, meaning that we are involving everyone in Thurston County systems, child welfare, juvenile justice, the public aid, community services, other organizations, individuals that have expertise. Everything is informing, from policies, procedures, to documents, to everyone is informing this project, and will be taking a part in providing wraparound support with the youth that we serve. This model itself is an intervention that is in prevention of homelessness that is cost effective in comparison to other models. Every model, from youth shelters to dormitories to group homes, are important across the continuum of services to youth. But this model itself has proven to be cost effective, and it's being replicated for a reason. It's showing results. Mason County has had 100% success rate in their program, and they've been around for about 8 years, if not more. Now, without the host stepping up, there is no program, meaning this model does not rely on a building. This is community partners, members bringing youth into their homes. And I'll go into a little more about what that process looks like. This model also offers a home-like environment and an ability for the youth, or opportunity for the youth, to not only engage with caring adults, but to receive mentorship and to be able to learn how to model certain behaviors, learn independent living skills. And it's a choice. So we'll provide more information on that here shortly. I want to definitely emphasize, I know I've shared a little bit of what is informing this program. There is an RCW defining this program. The RCW is important to note that the child welfare system was integral in the development of this definition, alongside host programs, to include Kim Reinhart, the executive director of the Mason County Host Program in Shelton. Everyone was involved in creating this. And again, it's important to note that again, within everything that's informing our project, there is a host best practices manual that we're using, developed here in the state of Washington by other programs. The Department of Commerce did research and recommendations in the development of programs such as this. We're following that. We're engaging again in conversations with the community, systems and organizations in informing our practice. And again, this program is youth choice. It's probably one of the only options across the services to youth. And volunteers are also, they make a choice whether to participate. They're volunteering their time. And it's important to note that this is not an extension of the foster care system. And we do not provide foster care services. We will, something to note in this slide is that we will be reporting to the Office of Homeless Youth at the end of each year with specific information on especially minor youth that we serve. Goals of the program. This is why our community is so important in this project. There will be opportunities for life skills, development and strengthening, financial literacy, banking. Each youth will be receiving a stipend of $50. Washington State Employee Credit Union has been gracious to provide education and offer an opportunity to open such bank accounts. Resume building and interviewing and cooking, and the list goes on. All of these goals, the community is going to be helping make possible to provide those opportunities to engage. Who are we serving? North Thurston high school students, North Thurston Public Schools high school students, up to 30 students the first year, and we plan to begin matching and enrolling students as soon as January 2022. It's important to note that parents and legal guardians do not lose at any point in time their parental rights over their child. They are going to be asked to give permission for their child to enroll in the program. And that's something that you may have noticed in the RCW. This provides you with information on what the actual process looks like. And again, referring to the RCW, you will see that we're making steps to be in compliance with that as a program. Classes, education will be important, not only for the host families, also for our staff, and it'll be continuous and ongoing. The volunteer coordinator, we're excited, the volunteer coordinator will be participating or undergoing training to become a mental health first aid facilitator. So our staff are excited to embrace that opportunity. This is what our staff composition will look like. The program is scalable. We anticipate enrolling 20 to 30 students in 2022 through 2023, and we'll hire staff as students enroll in the program. If the pilot budget is not met, then we scale back on case managers and potentially serve less youth. This is what our budget looks like for year 2021-22 through 23, and some of our expenses. Again, mentioning that it is a scalable program. And let me bring it in here. So with regard to the funding, we are excited that just recently Puget Sound Energy awarded Host Homes $10,000. We were among 433 applications, and they identified our application as one to make an impactful difference in the community. And if Megan is still with us, I would really like for her to share a little bit about the Anchor, the Away Home Washington Anchor Community Program Initiative.
Yeah, I sure will. Thanks, Gabby. So of course, when we took on the Host Homes program, I mean, the most significant piece for me as the executive director is to make sure that we have enough funding, both to, of course, launch the program, but to sustain over time. One of the ways we're doing that is by deeply partnering with the other housing and houselessness providers in our county. And we, as a collaborative, I think there was 9 to a dozen organizations who signed on to apply for Away Home Washington Anchor Community Initiative, which is a public-private partnership that brings funding and also technical assistance to the group of providers who are doing services for specifically adolescent youth who are homeless. CYS has taken the lead on that, and we're happy to announce we made it to the first round, and we'll be having an interview as a collective next week. That has the potential of bringing, I mean, you know, knock on wood, millions of dollars to the homeless and housing infrastructure for youth in our county. We're really excited. One of the reasons we're being looked at is because of our innovative partnerships and because of our innovative programming, including Host Homes. Anchor Community, or Anchor, oh my gosh, I'm from Anchorage, Alaska. So when I talk about the Anchor community, I just want to say Anchorage. The Anchor Community Initiative is excited specifically to see the amount of community commitment from local jurisdictions. We are also launching a Host Homes program in Tumwater, and the city of Tumwater has committed 2 years of funding to that work in Tumwater. So they're excited to see how our community is investing in housing and homelessness for especially unaccompanied homeless youth. very underserved population.
Thank you, Megan. And with regard to program evaluation, excited. There's been a lot of change and growth through this program, and we will be using multiple evaluation platforms to collect data, to monitor programs' progress and expected outcomes. We have strong data sharing agreement with local partnering education agencies, the schools. That's a big one, to collaborate and share school data, collected school data. In addition to that, the host homes will be using FERPA and HIPAA compliant Apricot software. And we will also be using the HMIS, all of which will be very helpful and serve a purpose in tracking long-term essentially. Now, through outcomes, program outcomes, some of the expected program outcomes, going back to those goals that we looked at earlier for youth, we're looking at reducing the number of participating youth who are unhoused, increase the number of youth in permanent housing, increase the number of youth employed, reduce length of time you spend homeless, and reduce number of unnecessary youth hospitalizations and lapses in mental health services, as well as reducing the returns of youth to houselessness within a year of exiting the program. That's something that we intend to do, is continue aftercare after a young person graduates from the program. And it's exciting. It definitely been quite a bit of work, research. There's been a lot of conversations. It's not just a together project, it's a community project, as we've been talking along this presentation. And if you have any questions, I welcome the questions. I know that there was a lot to digest here.
Can you please stop sharing your screen so I can?
Absolutely. Let me see. Yeah, stop sharing. There it is.
Stop sharing. There you go. So this looks like a really fantastic program. That I have a couple questions. One is there going to be any assistance to the families? Maybe I missed this, the families who take on, one of these kids. Obviously, I've had several teenagers come through my household over the years, and they're really expensive. So I was wondering if there's going to be any support that way. Then obviously, you guys sounds like you're looking for some dollars. Do you have a dollar amount in mind of what you're looking for from the city of Lacey?
Did you want to answer that, Megan?
Well, Gabby, how about you take the first question about what support will be given to the host families?
Absolutely.
And then I will make the ask.
Okay, so with regard to support, we're looking at stipends. They may not be the same amount that the foster care system provides, but a stipend nonetheless to assist, whether it's basic necessities or increases in bills, food, etc. And in addition to that, even gift certificates, right? And what the case managers and program manager bring, the daily support, whether it's mitigating, diffusing a situation, phone calls. We're going to have, it's a 24-hour program, 24/7. So staff will be available to the host families, and there will be, that RCW outlines quite a bit of what the expectation is, and we're working on delivering that for sure. But I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
I was going to answer also, as some of my friends have been interested in possibly hosting a student. One thing I say is that it is different from a foster care relationship, because the host families are hosts. So they're providing a safe space, of course, mentorship to the youth, but not a parenting relationship. Right? We are really looking for students to be building their life skills and their own skills for sustainable living after they're out of a host home. So rides will be provided by our staff when and if a host family that's not for them. So it's really about students learning to be independent so that when they transfer out of a host home, that they're ready to take on the adult world. So very different from a foster care relationship.
And I heard you right. It does sound like the parents have to agree to this. What happens if you're in a situation where there isn't a strong relationship between the parent and the person or the guardian, where that guardian may be, and the kid who's find themselves homeless? They might be on the streets because of a poor relationship.
Yes, that question has surfaced, and there are ways of supporting a young person to enroll in the program. So, and we're establishing those relationships with whether it be child welfare or the legal system, but there is a way.
Yeah, that's been a main question we've surfaced even with the programs that we've worked across the states. Of course, a lot of times kids are in this situation because their parents may be hard to reach themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the work of Together in the future. And then Mayor, your other question was, what is our financial ask? We did put in a written application in July, and our request from the city of Lacey is $100,000 commitment. We are doing fund development. The total budget for the program for this year is $400,000, and then into the following year it will be an $800,000 program. We're looking to scale the program over 2 years, of course, first and second year being pilot programs. And as I said, we're doing the same kind of fund development with partners in Tumwater.
Okay. Ed, do you have a question?
I don't know if this is an appropriate question in this particular venue, but going back to the host relationship. So you have hosts that are taking care of a minor child or housing a minor child. If there are disciplinary issues, if they're a host, and how is that resolved? If there's a disciplinary issue within the host's home, how does that work?
So the youth and the host, as they're working on the matching process, develop a living agreement of sorts. They discuss expectations and moving forward, go into this relationship with an understanding. Yes, there will be most likely situations that will warrant having to call, let's say, the case manager to assist in those circumstances, or the program manager. We're also working with youth to identify people within their network for hosting, and that's quite possibly another topic, but we're going to be available and present to diffuse, to help facilitate conversation, to mediate. And things do happen, they arise, and we're going to be doing our best to address those before they escalate.
Deputy Mayor?
So it's kind of a similar thing. So, and it's kind of a legal question. So youth are moving into somebody else's home, but they're and maybe I misheard this. I thought you said you had to get permission from their parents, but because that would take care of the legality of it. Is that what you were assuming about that? And if they've already been kicked out because of various reasons, is it even possible to get some of them to sign off for putting their child with
That's
somebody else?
That's sort of similar to what my first question was. It's like,
Yeah.
I still have if the host family, does the host family then have any legal authority over the child, or does that legal authority continue to be separate? Like sometimes you need someone to sign off on a field trip or so on and so forth.
So absolutely, that's an excellent question. That the parent authorization is a notarized document. It's an affidavit with a limited power of attorney. And through that document, there is permission for such things as field trips, taking the young person maybe to the doctor's office, attending school meetings, whether it's an IEP meeting or so going back to that mentorship, that caregiver role, the parent is in no way giving up their rights. And through most conversations that we've had with other programs that are similar to the one that we will be launching, parents, for the most part, are willing to collaborate, cooperate in these instances. And this type of program often serves as a space for potential family reunification, mending of relationships when healthy, right? And something that I didn't emphasize is that we are looking at hiring or bringing on a contracted mental health therapist to be able to assist and facilitate not only when there's a crisis, whether something comes up with the young person, they can help through mental health crisis, but also possibly even support the young person in whether it's plans of reunification. This is not to say that it's an ongoing service internally, because the young person will be connected to community resources, but it is all a part of that wraparound support. So I hope, go ahead.
Michael, you have something real quick? We're a little bit over on our time already.
Yeah. I'll be real quick. I heard you mention this is not anything new. You've had programs like this in other places too, right?
Yeah.
Is there a percentage track record of success of helping these youth with these challenges?
So is there, you asked a success rate? Is that what you just, okay.
Do these kids usually, once they are into a host family, do they usually stay there for a while, or do you see them going back on the street, or how's the program?
So Mason County, the Mason Host Program is very similar to the one that we're launching, working with essentially high school students, and they've had a 100% success rate. And it goes back to, if we do our due diligence and we continue to provide the support true to the model of the program, we should be able, if not the same success rate, comparable. But Kim's program, that's the magical how, right? And it goes back to those relationships, not only with the young person. And think of this, the young person has a choice. They're not being court ordered into someone's home. This is them saying, I want this. Them making these decisions with their host family and learning to build that relationship, a healthier relationship that sets them up for success even beyond the program. And that's what the students in Kim's program are experiencing. We've had a couple of young people speak to potential host families here in Thurston and share their stories. And I don't even have words for it. You'd have to listen to it.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say,
when do you have to have your budget together by before this is a go? Like when's the date you need to hear something by the city of Lacey, and you'll know what your budget is?
Yeah, I will answer that. So we are launching in January. We have partial funding for North Thurston, thanks to Community Foundation, and most notably North Thurston Education Foundation is the primary funder for the work in North Thurston Public Schools. They've committed $75,000 to the program for this year and next year. They are a fantastic partner, and we're so excited to be in partnership with them to move this forward. So we are launching But whether we can get to the number of students is whether we can raise that $400,000 for this year. So you would help us house more kiddos. I wanted to say one more thing about success rate. What Gabby was saying is that in Mason County, 100% of the students who have gone through the Host Homes program have graduated high school, and 100% of those students are stably housed as graduates and adults. And that is the main purpose of this program, is to stabilize youth who are unstably housed, who are facing barriers to staying connected in school. Give them a safe place to be, to stabilize their life. Because if we can intervene when kids are facing unstable housing and prevent more trauma, every day that a student spends homeless or on the street is a day closer to them not graduating from high school and becoming a chronic homeless adult. We want to stop that drip. And I think that's an area where lots of us get lost, that we can prevent homelessness if we intervene at the right places. And that's what this program aims to do.
Is that 30 students, the 100%?
Yeah, so our success would be if we graduated 100% of the students that we have housed.
Not us, but Mason.
Yeah.
Mason County? I'm not sure how.
No.
I think hers are in the hundreds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, she's over her 5+ years, she's housed a couple hundred youth, and all of them have graduated high school and have stable housing on the other end.
Lenny?
I know we're running way over on time, but I just want to say, to me, this is really where we need to be headed, right? If we can prevent these kids from becoming homeless, help these kids to actually graduate high school and remain housed after that, that's huge. I mean, that's fixing the problem before it becomes a problem, instead of what we've been spending a lot of our time on for the last 2 years, and trying to fix the problem that's already existing. So I think this is a great program.
Yeah. So we appreciate your time. What I'll recommend is that we bring in our finance director and talk to the city manager and see where we're going to be at. This will actually, probably be early next year, and it'll, need to be a budget amendment if we can get there. So we'll get back to you as soon as we can get something scheduled with the full council. Like I said, it'll probably be early next year before we get a chance to talk this through. But Scott.
Yeah, maybe this will help with council. So you may recall in the budget, we do have homeless services, and there is capacity in the budget depending if council wanted to move forward with this. It's just, again, it depends on your deliberation.
Yeah. And I think we're going to want to do that for sure. Okay. I just want to be able to chat a little bit more about that.
Okay.
We'll do that. We'll do that as soon as we possibly can get that scheduled.
Thank you for having us tonight, and our email doors are open for any additional questions you have, or if you'd like us to come to a work session or speak with Lacey City staff, we are open for that.
Sounds good. I mean, I think you're going to see support from our council. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Megan. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Next on our agenda is the tree regulations for HOAs, and it's been an ongoing conversation. Ryan Andrews is going to take this. He's actually going to take the next couple.
Yeah, so you get the Ryan show for the next hour and a half or so. So good evening, council. Could we also bring on Grant? I don't know who's controlling the Zoom. Maybe Alyssa, could you bring Grant on?
Do you have some walk-up music things you got the next hour and a half, Ryan?
Nothing prepared, sorry. Give me a second to share my screen. All right. Well, good evening. So yeah, we're here tonight, first of all, to talk about trees, and second, to talk about housing. So some big issues that Lacey's facing in its future. First thing is to talk about our tree protection regulations for homeowners associations and commercial properties. This is a continuation of a previous discussion, and we're looking to gain some direction on kind of some final decision making tonight as we prepare the final ordinance for your consideration. Before we get into the regulations, though, I want to just remind you that the council has adopted as of September 16th, the update to the Urban Forest Management Plan. So this is the framework document essentially that sets forth all the goals and policies and programs for Lacey's urban forest over the next 20 or so years. As part of this, our regulations are also set to be revised, but they have, as I mentioned, not yet been adopted. A little bit about the recommendations that came out of the plan. We enlisted the help of a tree task force. We had a number of community members from a broad sector of the community that met 5 times and provided the Planning Commission with recommendations on how and what to do with trees in Lacey. And basically they came up with the idea that protecting, educating, regulating, and enforcing, those are kind of the hallmarks of a holistic tree program. And that's really what is needed. And obviously we're talking about the regulating part here tonight. The implementation of the regulations that we do have has been a struggle in Lacey, particularly due to resource constraints. We do not have a city arborist on staff. We contract with arborists. And so really all of our decision-making is done at a staff level by staff planners reviewing projects and individual tree removal requests as well. So overall, the amendments that were done and proposed to the Urban Forest Management Plan and the regulations were relatively minor. So, after looking at what we have and what we need moving forward, the actual amendments were pretty minor. And one of the amendments that we're here to talk about tonight, the HOA and commercial amendments, was really not supported by either the task force or the Planning Commission. So they neither of them were particularly excited about making HOA or commercial tree removals easier. But we'll talk a little bit more about ways that we can do that and maybe meet in some kind of middle ground. So before I get into the regulations themselves, I'm going to talk a little bit about the hierarchy associated with tree protection in Lacey. I think this is really important when we consider the regulations, because there are certain regulations on trees that are very restrictive, and there are others that are less restrictive. And it all depends on what type of tree it is. So I'm going to go through right now and kind of go from top to bottom, the most restrictive to the least restrictive. So the most restrictive is historic trees. You can think of historic trees basically the same as a historic building on a historic register somewhere. We have regulations that essentially prohibit their removal kind of at all costs. The thing is right now is that we do not have any historic trees designated in Lacey. So if and when this was to come about, and if we were to designate historic trees, or a historic tree, then that would be the most protected tree that Lacey would have. The second is within a critical area or buffer. In Lacey, our typical critical area is in a wetland. So this would be in a wetland or a wetland buffer. That would be the second most restrictive. The third is a specimen tree, and a specimen tree is kind of the tree that's the best of its kind. So, a big Doug fir is not a specimen tree, but a unique individual that is a unique a tree to our area, that would be considered a specimen tree. Number 4 is trees in parks. So, that would be the trees in our city parks and open spaces. Number 5 are those trees that have been preserved through development in tree tracts and open spaces. So that's things like HOA open spaces, which we're going to talk about tonight, which could also include tree tracts. This could also be in commercial areas as well. Those trees that are set aside on the periphery that have been preserved through development. Number 6 is individual trees. So instead of number 5 is kind of groups of trees. Number 6 is individual trees in developed areas, both apply here, commercial and multifamily residential. And this is also in developing areas as well. So when we look at development applications, we're looking at saving individual trees. This might be an individual tree in a parking lot island or something like that. And then number 7, and the final one, the least restrictive, is single family residential. And single family residential has a unique permit avenue to be able to remove up to 5 trees in a 3-year period. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a little bit. So as you can see, we're really trying to come up with a permit avenue for the category 5 and 6 trees there. So those that have the most protective, those are regulated under our land clearing permit process. What we're looking is developing a new system for trees kind of within that 5 and 6 category. So as I mentioned, we have kind of 2 different pathways currently, and we're proposing a third. The first is on the left-hand side, those for the most restrictive trees, basically all the categories 1 through 6. Commercial, multifamily, new development, tree tracks and open space, those are all regulated through a land clearing permit. And that's a land use application and requires intensive staff review. On the lowest side of that, the category 7, that's your single family residential. Again, like I mentioned, 5 trees in a 3-year period, provided the minimum canopy ratio is maintained, which is 4 trees on 5,000 square feet. That can be done through an exemption permit, and those exemptions are essentially issued right at our front counter. There's very limited staff review. There's a verification that the trees on the property after removal are adequate to meet the ratios, but other than that, there is no, there's no administrative staff review other than an over-the-counter permit. So this is kind of this tree that started it all here in the Greenbrier HOA. This is 45th Avenue between Ruddle Road and College Street, the tree that started it all. A unique situation where these trees were preserved as part of the development. So again, think about that in terms of priority, but now have been causing concern from the neighbors because they're, shedding needles on properties, dropping branches, and they are a maintenance concern. A healthy tree. And so healthy trees don't have a permit avenue other than the land clearing permit process to be able to be reviewed. So let me go into this slide here. So this is the first one looking at our new permit process. So right now, our existing process is that a property owner may apply for a land clearing permit, but based on our arborist recommendation, that permit may be denied. So again, talking about that tree there on Greenbrier, those are healthy trees. They applied for a land clearing permit, but couldn't be issued because they were healthy trees. The new permit process, so what we're calling the land clearing permit light, or something that meets kind of in the middle, is I'll go into the details of that here in a little bit, but some of the important questions that we asked the staff is, number 1, who would make a decision on the permit? Number 2, how would they make that decision? What information would they consider when making that decision? What should a replanting standard be? Obviously you're going to be removing otherwise healthy large trees. What should those be replanted to what standard? And then how do we make sure that those trees that are replanted will remain? So let's move into the regulations themselves. So we have essentially 2 drafts that are part of your packet. One is the Planning Commission recommendation that does not have this language in it. The other is the staff amended version that has this avenue for tree tracks, open spaces, and commercial properties. So who would make a decision on the permit? That first question that was asked. Number 1 is the Community and Economic Development Director or designee. So essentially this would be a administrative decision done by the staff. So how would they make this decision? First of all, they would have to have a forester, a city arborist complete a report looking at whether or not there was a documented history of property damage, that typical maintenance and pruning is not feasible, or that it does not meet the criteria for a specimen tree. So if you think about, specimen trees, those are the key priority ones that we want to protect. And so if a tree was in an open space that was also a specimen tree, that would not qualify for removal. As far as a replanting standard, obviously, these could be large trees and we lose a certain amount of urban tree canopy associated with them, but also, kind of the benefits we get them from a carbon reduction standpoint. They take in a lot of CO2 and give us a lot of oxygen in return. And so when we look at the number of trees to be removed or the trees to be removed, we need to look at the larger trees and basically the ratio for a larger tree is higher for those smaller trees to be replanted. So you can see that for the largest tree, that's more than 25 inches caliper. That's going to be very similar to the Greenbrier tree. That's probably a 25-inch caliper tree. If that tree was to be removed, they'd have to replant 7 trees. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be replanted in that exact same area, but if there are other spots within that neighborhood, they would need to replant them throughout the neighborhood. And that goes all the way down to trees that are less than 6 inches in caliper. That would be a 1-for-1 replacement at that point.
It's almost like an NBA trade. Ryan, can I just jump in with a quick question?
Certainly.
Okay, so I think part of the thing was that some of the trees were disturbing or causing damage to like sidewalks and things that were so when we do the replanting of trees, are we have we addressed the fact that maybe they're too close to the sidewalk or because I was looking for that in the street tree requirements. Is that coming up or am I just early?
We're not talking about street trees here. We're talking about trees that are on private properties within open spaces. And so maybe this slide here starts to explain it, is that when a tree like this is proposed for removal, the applicant will need to do a tree protection professional report. And as part of that, look at the third bullet down there, is that locations for replanting, so that they actually have to work with our city arborist to look at whether or not that is a suitable spot for replanting. And if not, find another spot within their development or neighborhood where to accommodate that. Does that make sense?
That part does.
Okay. So as part of this report, they'll be looking at, they'll have to do a replanting plan, looking at suitability. So that's things like, suitability of sites and soils and, those kinds of things. Species recommendations. If you're going to take down a certain tree, what are you planning? What are you replacing with? If you're taking down a big Doug fir, are you replanting with other Douglas firs? Locations, which we just talked about a little bit. Maintenance and irrigation plan is really important here because you're taking down a mature tree that is essentially drought tolerant and replacing it with brand new trees which aren't. And so especially with our hot, dry summers that we've recently had, an irrigation plan is really going to be important for the survivability of those smaller trees that you're going to be doing or you're going to be installing. And then also a timeline associated with those replacements. Sometimes if you're taking down a tree in the middle of summer, it's not the best time to be replanting. You want to be replanting in the fall when you have kind of, the weather in your favor so that those trees can get established with the free irrigation that's coming out of the sky.
So quick question, Ryan, would they, that maintenance plan, and they would have to pay for making sure that it's maintained and et cetera, long term for X amount of time?
Yes.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, this is just a review. This is our current pathways. Remember, there was 2, the land clearing permit and the exemption, and we are proposing this land clearing light permit avenue, which is would be a new permit process that would encompass those regulations that I just talked about. So I think we've done a real good job of kind of finding a middle spot. I just wanted to kind of review here your options as you consider this and get some direction from you tonight as we go and prepare this final ordinance, what your kind of feelings are when it comes to, the way that this should read in final ordinance form. We'll come to you probably in early 2022, probably in January, first thing with the regulations. And so we want to make sure that we have an ordinance that you're expecting and that you would support rather than having to go back to the drawing board and start over. one other thing before I got to go through the options here is that, in developing these regulations, staff doesn't feel like that we will get too many of these applications. These will be fairly few and far between. The good thing is it does provide an avenue for people that want to remove a healthy tree that currently are not able to, but we don't get a lot of requests for that right now. So with that, number one, your option number one is you could just adopt the Planning Commission recommendation, which does not have this land clearing light capability within it. The pros of that is that all of the public comments, the task force, the feedback, it has a unanimous decision behind it, those kinds of things. The cons is that it does not provide flexibility for an HOA or a commercial property owner for those removals. The second one would just apply to HOAs. So we've been talking about this in terms of HOA and commercial properties. The second option is that you can just afford this avenue to HOAs and say commercial property owners, we feel like you should have to go through that land clearing permit standard process. The pros here is that obviously it would allow an HOA to be able to remove that healthy tree. The cons is that the public comment, the tree task force, and the Planning Commission did not support this, and it doesn't necessarily align with a lot of our urban forest management plan policies and goals. And the third, which the pros and cons are essentially the same as the one I just touched on, is that this would afford the HOAs and commercial property owners to remove the healthy trees through that land clearing light process. Pros and cons are the same. So with that, we've got three options. I'll turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing here. I believe that's my last slide. Yep, it is. I'll turn it over to you for questions and discussion.
So this has been an ongoing conversation. I just want to let you know, I've also had a meeting with members of TCAT and tried to explain how we got here. And there's just been some miscommunication or misunderstanding between TCAT and some of the people who were been opposed to this plan because they thought there was an avenue for this to happen. They thought that the 5 and 3 rule existed in HOAs and with commercial properties. And I said, that's not my understanding. And they said, well, yes, it is. And I said, well, I don't think that's the case. And so I, just talked to Rick about this again in preparation for this meeting. And that's why we're here having this discussion. And what I've talked about all along is there is always an exception to a rule, right? I mean, for example, if you have a healthy tree and it's on a commercial property and it's healthy, but it is breaking up your a planter, or you're breaking up your concrete or asphalt, it's too close to your building and it's constantly dropping stuff and causing damage on your building, but it's healthy. There is still no way that tree can be removed. And so even though it can be very, very rare, like it's been said here, as Ryan just put out, I think it's going to be extremely rare there's ever, because there's such a high standard you have to pass. You have to prove it's causing damage. You have to prove all these things. But at least it allows an avenue to have some equity between the private property owners, single residential property owners, and commercial and HOAs, which there is none, And so I think there's pretty good standards that the staff has come up with. And I think this is a pretty good compromise. I think it's rarely going to be used. Ideally, we would have a tree commission set up, and I start to see manager. It's not quite in the budget for this year, but something that I hope we can work towards, because we should also be going out and identifying historic trees and so on and so forth. There's a lot of work that we can do that tree commission can do in this space that we can't do right now with our current staffing levels and everything else. And we would need to add staff to run another commission. We see how much work that is. We just added 2 commissions this past year, all really good stuff. The tree commission would be really great as well. And we just need to figure out how we're going to do it. Deputy Mayor?
So personally, I want us to be as conservative as possible because of so many of our plans are really dependent on tree canopy. And so that's pretty important. I think the option 1 adds something because it forces people to plant more trees back. My concern is they might not find a place to plant them, and that's a concern. And
that's been brought up too. So if circumstance where, say, you're removing a tree and you wouldn't want to plant a tree right back there because you're going to run into the exact same again, and we can't find another place. What the staff is saying that we could do is that we could put a value dollar on that tree, and that tree would go into a pot that we could then go plant trees in areas that we need to increase our canopy area. So that they have thought of that too. I know Ryan didn't bring it up tonight, but that is something that is looking to go into the new ordinance.
Okay, I didn't see that when I read through this, but I read it very fast and it's long, so I could have missed that. But that's my big thing is I really think we can't wait. Trees provide shade so that, and it's getting hotter and hotter, and trees provide soil stability, etc., and water retention. And it's just really critical we keep as many trees as we can. And we're a tree city. So I'm not terribly sympathetic with individuals that don't like picking up needles. So
well, and so let's be clear here. If a tree is just dropping needles, that will not meet the bar.
Exactly. I realize that was sarcastic. I'm sorry.
To be proven to show that it's actually causing damage. It's actually you can't just say, oh, I want to remove the tree. But if there's a reason that the tree needs to be removed, it's not in our code to even allow it right now. And so that's where I think, this is the staff recommendation is a good way to go. At least it allows an avenue. And, it's not going to be cheap, right? Replacing the big tree, you're going to have to, these other trees are expensive to replant and do everything else, but at least it allows an avenue to do it. And so, I mean, I've been saying this.
Plus, I noticed the Planning Commission and the Advisory Council supported option 1 over the other 2, and the other 2, none of them supported nor did commenters. So that makes a difference to me.
Lenny?
So which of the 3 options is staff supporting first?
I think,
or is it really just, or
we've
3 options?
We're setting out the 3 for you all to weigh in on. Obviously, we've kind of come up with that compromise. And I think we're satisfied that it is a good compromise. We're also satisfied thinking that we're not going to get a lot of removals requests under this. So it doesn't give us a lot of pause that we're kind of opening up a lot of avenues for people to take down a bunch of trees. So I don't know if we necessarily have a thought on it one way or the other, but with the council's direction, we've provided some options.
Okay, well, I can tell you, I support option 3 on those 3 options, because as you said, Mayor, I believe we have to give the HOAs and commercial properties an avenue for trees that are causing damage. Again, it doesn't allow for, the one that just doesn't like raking up leaves and needles. It's not going to change that, and it shouldn't. But for those that are actually causing damage, sidewalks, asphalt, whatever it is, they should have the same ability to remove that tree as I do as an individual homeowner, or any of us do as a homeowner. So I support option 3.
Scott, then I saw Mike, then I'll go to Carolyn.
Yeah, just real quick. I just want to, the reason this is all before council is because you wanted an option. I just wanted to reaffirm that issue because I think there was some frustration. Ryan, help me. I think it goes back 2 years, actually a little bit longer than that, when Greenbrier came to council and then council was frustrated. There was really no response for their concern. So that's why we're really here.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this many times, and what we've asked is is to come up with an option to address those 2 issues, and option 3 addresses those issues. And I just don't think it's going to be very rarely used, because it's such a high bar, and it should be a high bar. But to say that there is no bar, I mean, That's just, it doesn't seem fair in my book. So it's Mike, and then I'll go to Carolyn.
Thanks, Mayor. All right. I think we can probably pretty much all agree that it's the 50+ inch trees that we don't want to see cut down and replaced with, 10 4-inch trees. Because those trees are going to take our lifetime plus another lifetime to get that big again. Do all those options cover, let's say you could take those tree units and put it somewhere else in the city. That's really my main concern, is because these heritage trees or these historic trees, the way you want to call it, whatever, those are the ones that need protecting the most, in my opinion. We could replace, 6-inch round trees hundreds at a time if we had to. You cannot replace that 150, 200-foot tree. It's just not possible. I'm leaning towards one, unless other options can protect those bigger trees, those historic trees.
I guess I'll help clarify that, because remember in that list that we have protections for those ones that are at the very top of the list, and those aren't the ones that we are considering for under option 3. The ones that we are those ones that are in the HOA open spaces and those individual trees that have been saved through development and those kinds of things, which aren't specimen or historic trees.
I just wanted to clarify, make sure I'm reading everything right. You know what I'm saying, Ryan?
Yeah. So, and I agree, we do need to categorize some of these trees, but I think through this process, if it's anything above those other 2 things, they're already protected. So, Carolyn, you're on mute.
Sorry, question then comment. To Ryan, I thought there was a provision that if a tree was a hazardous tree, that if it was causing damage or, endangering something, that there wouldn't be a problem with removing that tree. Am I mistaken?
Yeah, that's right. So tonight we're talking just about healthy trees. There is another alternate pathway for an exemption removal permit, which is for dead, diseased, or hazardous trees. And so we're not talking about that here tonight. That's something that's been well established. And if you had a dead, diseased, or hazardous tree, that is really not what we're considering tonight. What we're considering are those that are otherwise healthy.
But you can have a healthy tree that's breaking up your parking lot or going against your building and naturally dropping limbs, that it's healthy, but limbs fall off. And any windstorm we have, limbs are going to fall off a healthy tree as well. So it's talking about just it's like I said, it's a pretty high standard you're going to have to meet to be covered
Right.
under this.
But, yeah, I've just heard a couple of comments that suggested like there was no protection at all there. Ryan, has there been discussion and consideration about, particularly around these larger trees, if the interdependence that these trees have on to stay strong, and how they rely upon one another? Because you start taking them out, that weakens their system, and then they become hazard trees because they've lost that stability and support. Was there much consideration given to that?
Yeah, that would have to be part of the arborist report that would consider that. So you certainly would want to make sure that the trees that are left are wind firm trees. So, we don't want to cause, excessive blowdown and those kinds of things as a result of this. So, when an arborist is out, that's one of the basic things that they look at when they're looking at a stand of trees is, if we're taking down individual trees within the stand, are the remaining ones going to be wind firm? And usually the main concern is when the wind is coming out of the west or the southwest. Those are the most wind firm. So you're looking at those that are kind of on the eastern side of a stand of trees to make sure that when you start taking those down, that the rest will remain wind firm.
Right. And if the answer is no, they're not wind firm, then what happens?
Well, then they may not qualify for this land clearing permit light process. Then they would have to go through the full land clearing permit process, which then may end up in the denial of the permit.
Okay, I just wanted to get clear on that. Thank
Yep.
you.
Questions?
So I'm still pushing towards option 3. I haven't seen anything that would let me believe that this is going to end up in a bunch of healthy trees being cut down in the city of Lacey. It just, the standards are just too high. But to have no standard whatsoever is I don't think fair to commercial property owners over residential property owners. What's the difference between a residential property owner and a commercial property owner? I don't understand why a residential property owner can cut down 5 trees in 3 years without blinking an eye, and so, but a commercial property owner under no circumstances, if it's healthy, it's just not right. And I think we set a very high standard here that I'm comfortable, and I want to protect as many trees as possible. But I mean, you have to have some sort of an option. And like I said, I prefer the option to go in front of a commission and be able to talk about it and talk about a plan and so on and so forth. But we just don't have the ability to do that yet. So it's going to have to be staff dependent. Deputy Mayor?
So I want to verify the planning commission and the advisory committee or task force supported option 1. Is that correct? And they didn't support option 2 and 3, but it still allows a way to take down healthy trees if they meet certain major criteria or not.
In option 1, there's no option. And here's the problem is when I was talking to TCAT members, they thought the 5 and 3 rule still applied to every land use. And that's why I said, no, it doesn't. And
well,
so
I'm asking Ryan, so there is zero flexibility and that light of saying, but so you're going against the planning commission and the option 3 and 2 go against what the planning commission is recommending and what the task force is recommending. Is that correct?
I'm not going against anybody.
No, I know that, but option 2 and 3 are.
I'm giving you an option that was provided the council said, hey, we would like to take a look at this other avenue that is not supported by the public, the planning commission, or the advisory committee, correct?
Or any of the commenters.
Certainly there were commenters, but that supported this. I mean, it came from Greenbrier. I'm sure that we could find comments in there that said, hey, there are some commercial property owners, I think, that would also support it. But the vast majority, the overwhelming majority said, we feel like these restrictions should be kept in place and there shouldn't be an avenue to be able to remove them any easier.
and again, I think I just had this conversation with members of TCAT, and they thought there was ways for those trees, they thought the 5 and 3 rule applied across and it doesn't. So there's miscommunication going on here. That's what's so frustrating. It's like, if the 5 and 3 rule doesn't apply on commercial property, it doesn't apply. And so for them for the planning commission to think that it does, or for members of TCAT to think that it does, it doesn't. It doesn't apply. And so that's why I'm
Hear from Grant.
Grant had a question or a comment.
No volume, Grant, even though your microphone's on.
Still can't hear you for some reason. Uh-oh.
Did it freeze?
No, I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe. Yeah, now it does look like it's frozen.
It looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it's frozen.
So do I see a hand? Can I get a vote of hands? Is there 4 votes here to support number 3? I mean, I've been pretty clear all along that I want some sort of an option. There's 3.
I'm for option 1.
I
I'm
would,
for option 1.
I'm for option one, but I really want to hear from Grant, and I don't know if it helps him turning off his video, but I freeze occasionally too, so sometimes that helps with the connection.
Well, Mike, Malcolm, where are you at on this?
I'm on option 3 right now.
So it's 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4.
I want to see, you know, the ability to remove, you know, trees that are causing damage. That would be great, because I don't think, you know, an entity should have less rights than an individual. In that capacity, it almost seems as if we're discriminating.
But these aren't causing damage. They just want to take them down because.
No.
Just damage.
Proven it's causing.
You can do something with damage if it's causing dangers. They're dangerous.
You can have a healthy tree that's
Danger is different than property damage. Under option 1, which is basically the current rules, is all option 1 is, that you cannot remove a healthy tree because of it doing property damage. That would be the reason for going with either 2 or 3, is so that you can.
I mean, if it's dropping a limb here too, if it's taking off a gutter here and now, it's healthy, you still can't remove it.
But you can limit and do those things. I mean, you can trim and do maintenance on your trees. I'm sure you're not totally on to do.
If it's breaking your sidewalk or it's breaking your asphalt, you can't do anything about that on an HOA or commercial property under the current rules.
Is that considered dangerous of tripping over a broken up sidewalk?
Yes.
Well,
And therefore, if it's dangerous, it falls under something else.
I saw
causing damage.
I saw Grant turn his.
Grant, do you have anything?
I saw Grant turned his video off, but his microphone's now muted. Maybe if he unmutes it, we can hear him because he turned the video off.
It is unmuted and my video is not working. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. I am so sorry. What I was going to add was, I think, neither the Planning Commission or the Urban Forestry Management group looked at what Ryan's presenting as an option tonight, which added, it allows a path forward, but it also adds those protections. So we're still meeting the intent of the Urban Forestry Management Plan. And I think that's a distinction that needs to be considered, because he's done a great job of finding a balance that allows us to continue to implement our plans in the way that they were intended and still give a path forward for this group of people. Ryan, is that fair?
Yeah. Thanks, Grant.
Yeah, and I talked to Rick about this too, and I go, what's your gut telling me, Rick? And he's like, yeah, I get it. There's every once in a while there's this unique circumstance where a otherwise healthy tree should come down, but there's no path forward for those individuals who are commercial property owners. And I just keep going back to why is a commercial property owner being treated different than a residential property owner when all along a lot of the public thought the 5 and 3 rule existed on commercial properties, and it doesn't. That's why we've talked about this. So I just, as a commercial property owner, you have less rights than a residential property owner. I mean, I don't know how we can sit there straight face and say that's the case. I mean,
Mayor, it's not surprising that the public would be confused. Look at the confusion amongst our own council. Not everyone is on the same page, even understanding this. So and we've dealt with it multiple times. So it's obvious why the public would have some confusion on this.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think as far as I can tell, there's 4 votes going forward for the option 3. That's still going to be in front of the council, and between now and then, I mean, I wouldn't even mind the Planning Commission just having at least a briefing of what this compromise is and get their input from there. I mean, they haven't had the full story either. So, because this wasn't even an option. These options weren't provided to the Planning Commission. So,
but just to clarify, so I'm just going to maybe help kind of wrap this up a little bit, because we do have a significant number of housing items coming up here as well that we need to talk about, is, you know, I'm hearing that there is a majority of the council that would favor option 3. While the Planning Commission did not directly address this version, because this has all been council directed, they were asked the questions, as well as the public, as well as as well as everybody else. Should the regulations allow for a pathway for healthy tree removals for HOAs and commercial properties? And that's where we got that feedback. And so the specific regulations, you're correct, they were not reviewed, but the question was asked, and that was the response we got back. But I think that the council is well within their, you've made a well-documented argument as to why that should be allowed. You've heard from staff that's provided this kind of compromise position. And, I think what we'll do is we'll bring to the council here in January a version that has what we've been talking about as option 3 with the pathway for HOA and commercial removals. And then we could also.
I don't even mind it coming from, to be able to monitor this and be able to reevaluate to see if it needs to be adjusted, right? If somehow all of a sudden we're taking down healthy trees left and right, the standard's always being met and it's causing an issue, then we've been too lenient, right? But I just can't get from zero leniency to Mike.
I think something that can get me over the hump is maybe not the 3 to 5, but maybe a 1 to 3, because it makes sense for big associations like Hawks Prairie or Horizon Point, where Lenny lives, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of trees out there planted by the master plan, right? But the smaller homeowners associations, in a matter of 5 years, they could go through 15, 20 trees and not have any left. Does that make sense?
But this doesn't do that.
I just don't think you could take down more than a tree on a very rare.
A permit process for each tree. This isn't that 3 to 5. There's no multiple tree removal. Each tree would have to meet the requirements that Ryan just laid out.
And maybe we need to let's go over the requirements again of what we could do. But right now I see 4 votes going forward. We can discuss this again when it comes back up in front of the full council. But I think we beat this to death. So
it's safe to say none of us will go for option 2, right?
Well, yeah, we have unanimous consent. Not that option 2 is off the table. There we go.
It didn't seem like the other options met the complaint. And then in addition to that, every time, an HOA or somebody has to repair a sidewalk or whatever, it's costing the people that live there more money every time. And if we can get their budgets down, maybe even just a fraction, then I think we've helped out a little bit.
Yeah. There's always an exception to a rule. I've been pretty clear about this no matter what. I don't care what the topic's been. There's always has to be an exception to the rule. And this is one of those times where when you have no exception to the rule, that's usually bad. It's usually a bad ordinance, in my opinion. So,
well, I have to admit, I don't belong to an HOA, so I'm not terribly sympathetic just up front. I don't believe in HOAs actually. So, but trees are rather important, and I just giving people a permission just because they'll come up with a way around damage very easily, knowing most people.
I don't think anyone's going to fool our arborist in the city of Lacey. Let's move on. So next up is the housing inflation, the low density zone consolidation, blah, blah, blah. Ryan.
Okay. You guys see that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
All right.
You need to, we see everything on the left. I think you need to hit your.
Roger. Okay, so moving on to our housing related items, that the next agenda item here tonight. So we have 3 different housing related initiatives that are proposed and are are in front of you tonight for some additional information and some feedback from you before it does move forward. First being the low density zone consolidation, the second being a fee waiver expansion, and a third being an extension of our multifamily tax exemption program. As you all are aware, Lacey does not have a housing program. We don't have a specific staff member that is doing housing related work, but we do have a significant number of plans and policies related to housing. And one of those things that we can do is address regulations, address fees, and make development more feasible. And so that is really the theme of tonight, and that's all being done by proposed regulations that are contained in our municipal code, whether that be in our zoning code or in other spots within our code. So this first one is what we call the low density zone consolidation. And this is something that the Planning Commission made a recommendation about a year plus ago that would take our two low density zones and combine them or consolidate them into one zone, and then also allow duplexes and triplexes within existing neighborhoods. So you may have heard of like the missing middle in Olympia. This is something that is somewhat parallel to that process. So as I mentioned, we have a number of housing related documents and policies, but really it all starts with the framework of the housing element of our comprehensive plan. And this does have a couple of goals in it that specifically talk right about this low density zone consolidation. And really goal number one speaks to it perfectly, which is that we have a sufficient number of single family dwelling units, multifamily units, special needs housing to provide a selection of rental and home ownership affordable housing opportunities for all. It's important though that when we're looking at this, because a lot of it is going to be accommodated within existing neighborhoods, is that when we do implement this, that we do that so that it's compatible and harmonious with existing neighborhood character, while we're allowing more infill and redevelopment. We also have a specific action within our affordable housing strategy. So the council in 2019 adopted the city's affordable housing strategy, which set forth a number of specific actions on how to address the affordable housing issue that was emerging at that point, which at this point hasn't resolved itself by any means. But one of the actions specifically within that the council considered and prioritized moving forward is to reduce minimum lot size and increase zoning density minimums, especially in our older, more central neighborhoods. And then looking at our current low density zones as a way to be able to do that by allowing more duplexes and triplexes in low density neighborhoods. We also have our housing action plan. So this was adopted as part of the 2021 suite of comprehensive plan amendments, which also set forth this as a possible action to be implemented as well. So that was action 4A, which specifically stated increasing the type of housing allowed in low density residential zones, duplexes and triplexes. So what we have in Lacey is really a supply and demand issue when it comes to housing. And how do we increase the supply of housing with the limited land that we do have available? So our population within Lacey and the Lacey urban growth area is projected to increase by a lot in the next 20 years, by 22,000 people. The problem with this is that in accommodating this population, our city is nearing build out. And so to accommodate this population within the city limits, we need to accommodate that within existing neighborhoods or within existing built areas by infilling and redeveloping. And this is a 2019 number, as of 2019, we had less than 30 vacant properties. So, in 2 years, I would assume that we have quite a few less than 30 vacant properties in Lacey to be able to accommodate our substantial amount of growth. This chart here is right out of our housing needs assessment, right out of the gap analysis that was done by Thurston Regional Planning Council. And what it shows is the number of dwellings that are needed to be constructed or projected to be constructed in the next 25 years in Lacey, and the income strata that is associated with that demand. And where you can see that Lacey has the biggest demand is those folks that are between 50% to 80% AMI. So you can see 4,000 dwelling units projected at 50 to 80% AMI. And so really that also has a lot to do with our housing affordability. So, not everything can be market rate, because if people that are 50 to 80% typically are not able to afford things that are at market rate. So we need to make sure that we're addressing this through this infill and redevelopment, and making sure that we're allowing things like affordable rentals, duplexes, and triplexes as an option within our existing neighborhoods. It's important to note, though, that this doesn't just stand on its own, that we have several affordable housing initiatives that the council's been working on for over the years, reducing fees for affordable housing. I'll talk about how we can expand this program here in the next little bit. We've done a lot related to our permit streamlining. We've got a new permit system that hopefully will be onboarded here within the next few months within our community development department to bring our permit system online. So we'll be online, be able to take credit cards. So we'll be able to streamline that. But we also have our pre-approved, our award-winning pre-approved ADU program that's been really successful and has reduced barriers for people to have to get plans to do an accessory dwelling unit in Lacey. We're also providing city-owned properties to nonprofits to building units. I think the latest proposals for an Oxford House on some city-owned property that we do have. We've also directed a portion of our state sales tax to affordable housing. The council did this recently. And then we're able to do all this with zoning changes as well. And that's what's in front of you here tonight. So let's go through what is specifically being proposed in these amendments. So this is the actual zoning text that is proposed to be changed. First of all, it would consolidate our two existing zoning districts, our low density 0 to 4 units per acre and our low density 3 to 6 units per acre into one zone. This new zone will utilize the existing low density 3 to 6 zoning standards. So those lots that are currently zoned 0 to 4 would get some additional benefit with things like minimum lot size and setbacks and those kinds of things to get a little bit additional development out of those larger lots. Properties currently zoned 0 to 4 can develop at up to 6 units per acre with reduced lot sizes. I guess I just mentioned that. And a duplex or a triplex can be built on an existing lot of record, which can exceed maximum density requirements. So an individual duplex or triplex on a lot does not need to meet the 6 units per acre standard. It can actually go above that. And there is a minor amendment to the setbacks as well. The rear setback would go from a 20-foot setback to a 15-foot setback. The council has approved part of this already, which is you recently approved an amendment to the rear setback for single-story ADUs from 15 feet to 5 feet. And this was a crucial part of making the pre-approved ADU program work, because it allowed for more ADUs to be built in backyards because they were able to go up closer to that rear setback. So when the Planning Commission went through this process, one of the things they were really concerned about was, where in Lacey would this apply? And so we did some mapping, and this is a map that's shown on your screen here, first of all, of Northeast Lacey, and then I'll show Central South Lacey on what parcels this would generally apply to. So these are parcels that are zoned low density residential that are near sewer. So sewer, you're gonna have sewer to be able to get additional development and be over 10,000 square feet. So you can see on the map here, so the city limits is in tan. On the right-hand side, that's a cluster of red lots that this would apply to around the intersection of Meridian Road and 31st Avenue. So other than that, there's just kind of a small smattering of other lots throughout kind of Meridian Campus and Jubilee.
Hey, Brian, I think Councilor Greens has a question.
Yeah, before you go on, Ryan, I just wanted to clarify something. Can you go back? Can you go back to slides? Yeah. So just a quick question on this. So if it's currently zoned low density 0 to 4, they can develop up to 6 units per acre under this amendment. Yep. Can they do less than 3 though? So in other words, could they still do 2 for that?
Yeah. It's essentially a 6 and under zone. So it would be a 0 to 6.
Okay, so it's not 3 to 6, it's 0 to 6. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Just wanted to clarify.
Good question. So this is kind of the southern portion of Lacey. So this is where this zone consolidation would really apply. If you can see here on the map, right in the center is Hicks Lake. So you'd be looking kind of north and west of Hicks Lake, the area.
Is there any way to blow that up? So
I don't have the Zoom capacity to be able to do that.
Okay,
I'd be happy to share the map with and the proposal with the council to be able to see this in a little bit more detail. But
you can paint it out on your screen.
Can you guys see that? Can you see that? Does that blow it up for you?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I didn't even know that was possible. So you can see it's really clustered kind of between Carpenter, west to Ruddle Road, and then west to College Street, north of Mullen. So it's really going to be in our older neighborhoods, larger lots, those that are 10,000 square feet or older or larger, and have sewer. Wow, that worked. Cool. So what does this look like in practice? So let's look at a standard vacant lot. So maybe the house has never been built there, or a house has been demolished in a single family subdivision with larger lots that's about 10,000 square foot. So when we're looking at this, there's one way to be able to do this that increases home ownership, and that is by subdividing the lots. So you would be allowed to do 2 5,000 square foot lots. On the left-hand side is showing 2 single family homes that could be subdivided. The other way is to actually do 2 townhomes. That's the right-hand side there, where you actually have the property line that splits down the middle. So essentially a duplex, but it has a property line going right down the middle. The other way would be to be more conducive to rentals. This is on the left-hand side, a standard duplex design. On the right is a triplex design. So these do not have property lines that run down the middle of them, but would be rented individually as units. So you could have an owner occupy one unit and rent out the other, or they could all be renter occupied. I did want to mention, though, I've talked a little bit about some of the factors that go into this, but there are some things that might prohibit or limit the amount of lots that this would actually apply to. First of all, private covenants may prohibit uses other than single family residential in some of our neighborhoods. So when you have homeowners associations, a lot of those covenants specifically prohibit anything other than single family residential. Those are not regulated by the city. Those are regulated by the HOA, but they do apply. And so, we're not going to go through everybody's covenants, but that's the onus is on the applicant to go to their HOA and figure out whether or not that their specific proposal meets their covenants. Talked a little bit about utility availability. Obviously, those lots that are on septic and drain field, they're not going to be able to take advantage of this because of the amount of space generally that those things take in an individual lot. You're really going to need to have city sewer to be able to do this. There's also some economic considerations as well. Some concerns have been in the past that, this would really affect these low density neighborhoods because we're going to have out of town developers that are going to buy up houses and demolish them and build duplexes and triplexes in their place, when that's really not the case. Because, when you have a house that's maybe, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, you're not going to demolish that house to build a duplex or a triplex in its place. What you'll see is those properties maybe that are distressed or vacant. Those are the properties that may take advantage of something like this. It's also important that we have design review and compatibility requirements. And we have had on the books here in Lacey for a number of years. And I'll actually show you some pictures of some successful projects that have passed our design review standards. And so we have standards that basically state that duplexes and triplexes are required to look just like a single family home in terms of roof pitch, siding type, garage orientation, and those kinds of things. We also heard a lot in terms of traffic impacts, people concerned that if you had a triplex, that creates a lot more traffic than a single family residence. So what we did was we went back to the ITE manual, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers manual, which actually shows traffic trips associated with each of these uses during the PM peak hour between 4 and 6 p.m. What it showed was a single family home is 1 PM peak hour trip. A duplex is 1.12, so slightly more than a single family. And when I say duplex, I mean both halves. So an individual half of that duplex is like 0.56 of a PM peak trip. In a triplex, you would think typically that creates 3 more trips, but actually the transportation engineers say it does not, because of the types of units these are. They actually generate way less traffic, and that is 1.68 PM peak trip for the entire triplex. So these are some successful projects that I'll kind of show you here that that the Planning Commission looked at going through the public process. This is a duplex, standard duplex on Hall Street. This is an older project, but as you can see, it looks very much similar to an existing single-family home in an older neighborhood. The roof pitch, the siding type, the garage orientation, and those kinds of things are typical with a older development or older neighborhood in Lacey. This is actually a duplex that's on Willow Street. So this is this is actually a duplex. It's actually 2 duplexes. This is the fronting duplex, and there's actually a second unit behind it. It looks like a single family home when you look at it from Willow Street. But if you look at where that kind of red truck is parked on the left-hand side there, that's actually where the second unit of that duplex is, off of that little alley there. So, you know, they've done a really good job of being compatible and almost looking, for all intents and purposes, from the front of the street like a single family residence. This is an example in a newer context, in a newer neighborhood. This is down in Horizon Point at the intersection of 66th and Bailey Street. This isn't actually a duplex, but this is a single family residence with an ADU incorporated within it. So the front of the house is where the main unit is. The ADU is actually in the back off Bailey Street. So that little kind of stoop that you can see on the right-hand side, that's actually the access to the ADU. So it's essentially 2 units, but it looks just like one large house. And then this is a successful project that the Housing Authority did at the intersection of 14th and Golf Club. This is a triplex example. So you can see, you know, roof pitch, siding types, window orientation, and front porches, all those good things, with an alley in the back and the garages off the alley. You know, all projects that have basically been really successful in incorporating these design aspects into older neighborhoods. So all of the projects that we're talking about with this low density zone consolidation would have to adhere by these same design codes that these projects have as well. So let's talk about the Planning Commission's recommendation. This was a 9-month process with significant public outreach and deliberation. The Planning Commission actually sat down and went through each design item with each criteria and came to consensus on each one individually as we reviewed the proposal. They weighed the public testimony, the information received, and developed an extensive record that supports these amendments. It was a 6-2 recommendation of approval. It was not unanimous, but it was overwhelmingly in favor. I did want to mention that there has, since that time, so the way this is kind of played out is this recommendation came out just basically right as COVID was starting. And, you know, we felt like we needed to tap the brakes on this a little bit to not necessarily change people's zoning right at the beginning of a pandemic. But it seems like now things have kind of changed. We're a little bit more not necessarily an emergency, but we're looking at housing affordability issues and ways that the city can address this. And this is one of the things that the council can do. In fact, the state legislature has actually passed regulations that if the council was to pass this, that it prohibits any kind of appeals as a result. So it actually protects the city from any type of appeal as a result of the passage of this legislation, because the state has actually stepped in and said, hey, if you as a city take this on and complete this kind of missing middle idea, we'll support that enough to say you don't even need to worry about any kind of appeals as a result of this. So before I turn it over to you for any questions or comments, I did want to mention that this is a pending Planning Commission recommendation. And so it will be considered by the council at a future regular meeting, probably coming up here after the first of the year. So that ordinance will be in front of you shortly. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to you for any questions.
Any questions? Deputy Mayor?
I don't have any questions, but I think it looks really great and a good solution to trying to do more density. So yeah, it's great.
Malcolm, and then Ed.
Ryan, do you know if we acquired any new building lots in any of our most recent annexations?
No, not really. I didn't really look at that specifically, but nothing stands out as, you know, a bunch of potential development. It's all potentially developed.
I'm curious if some of these more, of course, the ADUs are going to be allowed in Cap City, right? Once they come on sewer.
Right.
The recent annexation that's going to add a few more lots around Lake Lois Habitat Reserve will qualify as well. And so, but this is a good reminder, you know, if you look out in Northeast Lacey, there's quite a few lots out there that I'm sure if we annexed would qualify for this as well. And so we should be talking, you know, the county's supposed to be adopting our standards. What happened, you know, what would that process be like? You know, if we adopted this, would this automatically become the rule in our urban growth area, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, so the way it would happen is that the city would adopt it first, and then subsequently through joint planning, the county would adopt it as well. Just so everybody's aware, the county is extremely behind in any of our regulations, and so essentially very limited amendments have been done since about 2003. So they're operating under substantially older regulations in the county. We'll talk about this at future meetings. Our work program for 2022 is going to address the joint planning with the county. So our hope is by the end of 2022, all this stuff will be brought up to current city standard.
Okay, Mike?
No, you'd said me and then.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Ed.
Go ahead, Ed.
You know what, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, okay, great.
Can you take over this meeting for me?
Thanks, Andy.
Okay, so
Yes.
my question is,
Feel better.
do we have a good idea what the population would look like if most of this landmass is being utilized for multifamily? You know, what is that going to look like for population? How is that going to affect our infrastructure? What are some consequences to this push?
Yeah, so, you know, our population projections, we've already far exceeded our population projections by the year, I think by 2025, we're already past those. And so, you know, if something like this doesn't move forward, we would have to look at rezoning or upzoning other properties to be able to accommodate the population. So that would mean, you know, we'd have to take a hard look at where that could happen. As far as the utilities question, you know, we reached out to Public Works early into this process, and they were confident. These are mostly older neighborhoods that have adequate water lines and those kinds of water and sewer lines to be able to accommodate this.
So this would preempt the county to start the kind of a similar process. And to your point, they don't have the updated plans for infrastructure that we do. And over time, at some point, we're going to capture that urban growth area, so that could work against us in the long run. If we were to accept this restructuring of our zoning, that could affect, you know, the urban growth area and what we have to deal with in the future.
I'm not tracking.
You don't understand? Okay.
what I understand is that they will bring it up to our codes so that when we do annex, it will meet our codes. They're working together, if I understood it correctly.
And that joint planning includes infrastructure planning for
Yeah.
ultimately to be
Okay.
on city services, so.
Okay,
So
so that's where,
Michael-
I guess that's where I was confused, is this going to be an effort that the county is going to try to meet or come close to our standards?
So Michael,
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So similar to Cap City, where people were encouraged to hook up by lot waiving connection fees and stuff like that. If properties that are on septic, had the opportunity to be on sewer, there'd be a lot more properties that could qualify for this program. So that's something we should consider, because it's all over the map. We could double or triple those red zones in our city and urban growth areas, because there's a lot of areas that are really close to sewer. Even if you go to Silverhawk or where I live on the south side of Hicks Lake, those are bigger lots. Sewer goes right up to the property line, basically, or the city limit. I'm even in Lacey, so I just know there's a lot more opportunities if we think outside the box a little bit.
are there any more questions about this? Because I take you're going to eventually bring it up to the council, correct?
Correct.
I just wanted to bring up one thing to touch base on Ed's part is it's not like that's not existing right now. There's people living with their parents and grandparents and, 2 houses in a single family home. So we shouldn't kid ourselves thinking that there isn't that going on already. And it's not affecting our infrastructure. Single house doesn't mean it's just, a husband and wife or a significant other with maybe a kid or no kids.
Okay, so let's, sorry about that. My computer was getting ready to die. So let's take a look at the next item. Okay, so we'll move into the expansion of the fee waiver program for affordable housing. This is Lacey Municipal Code 1.20. This is the section of our code that talks about fees and those kinds of things. So we do have an existing fee waiver program. I think the council is well aware of. We do have a fee waiver for development purposes when it comes to things like community-based housing development organizations. So that's entities like Home First and those kinds of folks, our Boys and Girls Club and Habitat for Humanity. Those are both specifically called out within our regulations. Those fees that are eligible to be waived under this program, this current program, are things like your building permit fees, your mechanical fees, plumbing, electrical fees, your plan check associated with those. So not only the permit fees, but also the plan check, the water meter fee, the transportation mitigation fee. So with all new development, there's a transportation fee that is waived. And then you are allowed to defer your wastewater connection fee. So that's the fee that the city charges. You're allowed to defer that to a future date. It still means you need to pay it, but it's allowed to be deferred under this section. This fee waiver program has really been used successfully in Lacey, and really a successful project on this is the Deo Vista on Habitat for Humanity project at 37th and College, that otherwise wouldn't be able to have done that project without the fee waiver program that the city has had in place. So we're looking at expanding that. The council's requested that we look at how do we expand this to the for-profit sector building affordable units. This is also right out of our affordable housing strategy as well. So what we've done, and there is a draft of a potential ordinance in your packet, which includes program criteria, because the criteria is a little different when it comes to the private sector. The nonprofit sector, they tend to kind of oversee their own units and programs. And so there's not as much administration as there would be under a for-profit proposal. So first is, and a question for the council is looking at income thresholds. We have proposed within the regulations that this apply to projects that designate low-income units of up to 80% AMI. But it could be anywhere down the line, all the way down to very low income at 50% AMI. The advantage of the 80% of AMI is that it's going to apply to more people making a little bit more money than it would be at the 50% level. The program does propose that 10%, a minimum of 10% of the units within the development be required to be affordable, to be able, or to be at 80% or 50% less AMI to be able to take advantage of the proposal. That's the second bullet there. There's also a length of time the unit is required to stay affordable. Within the regulations, we have proposed that this is in perpetuity. So this length of time is forever unless they are removed from the program. And the way to be able to do that, if that unit goes from an affordable or low income unit to a market rate unit, then the repayment of fees is required. So they would actually have to come back to the city to be able to pay the remainder of those fees. As I mentioned, the administration is kind of the difficult part of this. There is not currently city staff to oversee a program like this. So we would have the developer enter into a partnership with a nonprofit to oversee the management. And that would also result in annual reporting that would be done to the city. So we would be involved in the annual reporting, but we wouldn't oversee the qualifications of the person that was actually in this unit. So I think that we proposed this, or the land use committee saw this at some point within the last year. Since that point, we've done outreach to our building community directly with OMB, Government Affairs, and the Thurston Chamber. They gave us some good feedback, which was number one, concerns about increasing permit fees to subsidize the reduction that would be afforded through this program. So they were basically saying, hey, if you're going to reduce fees for low income folks over here, we don't want our fees to be raised on this side to balance that out. They also said, hey, we have limited experience when it comes to providing low income units in our community. So they said, we feel like we're not the right ones to be reaching out to. The good thing is that this does is it lowers the barrier. So if we do have those folks that want to take advantage of this, even though our local development community might not, we may be able to have folks that would want to from outside of our community. And it is also an important tool that could improve development feasibility. So if somebody is looking to do a project that would cater to some low-income folks, then this is a way that this could improve their pro forma to make a development like this more feasible. So with that, the next step is an ordinance for the city council consideration. You have a draft in front of you tonight. And what we would do is, based on your feedback, is take this and combine it with everything we're talking about tonight, the low density zone consolidation, this, and then the next item, package that up as one package. So we'd like to get your feedback on that here tonight before we send it to you here within the next month or two. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any feedback on this.
Is there any questions? Lenny?
Not really a question, just I want to say thank you to Ryan, because this is something I've been asking for quite some time, that I thought it always made sense to me that if we want more affordable housing and we're going to waive fees for the nonprofits, it just seemed logical that we would also offer that to, the private sector, as long as they were willing to build affordable housing. And I always prefer the idea of the carrot over the stick. And this is just a clear example of offering them a carrot for doing what we'd like them to do. So I totally support this.
Are there any other comments? Like Lenny, I honestly believe that this is really good. One of the things that developers you see, they never ever really do much low income housing. And I think this is an incentive to get some more on the books. So, but that's my opinion. Is everyone kind of comfortable with it moving up to the council as a full ordinance, kind of thumbs up things? Yes?
Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so the last item is the extension of the multifamily tax exemption program. So this is a separate section of the municipal code as well. This is section 3.64. We currently have a multifamily tax exemption program that was established by the city council in 2014. When that was first put into place, it did have an expiration date, and that's currently valid as of December 31st, 2024, unless the council takes action to extend it. So you did have basically a 10-year target timeline, and if the council doesn't extend it, then it will end December 31st of 2024. As a reminder, this multifamily tax exemption program does exempt the payment of property taxes for multifamily projects of 20 units or more. It applies to a target area. So that target area in Lacey is the Lacey Woodland District or Lacey Midtown area. That exemption of property taxes is 8 years for market rate, or 12 years if at least 20% are dedicated as low income. And that definition of low income here is 80% or below area median income. There's been one project, the MJR Apartments on 6th Avenue, that has utilized the exemption. They've utilized the 8-year market rate exemption, and the council just reviewed that, I think, within the last couple of meetings. So, why is this coming to you now? We still have, a couple of years until 2024. Well, a recommendation of the Lacey Midtown market analysis is to extend this program because of the positive impact that it's having on the economics of redevelopment in the area. And when developers are looking at redeveloping or developing in the first place and looking to take advantage of this, they want to make sure that this exemption will be in place while they are undertaking their development. And so if they're doing development feasibility right now, and they're looking at an exemption program that might expire in 3 years, they want to make sure that their project is well underway. And so this could affect the feasibility of a project. So that Lacey Midtown market analysis that we completed really spoke to this and had a specific recommendation that came out of this that said, hey, the city should really look at extending this. And so our recommendation would be to extend it for another 10 years. So that would take it out to 2034. So with that, again, this would be part of that same package that would come to you here in the near future and would extend that program. Be happy to take any questions or any feedback that you might have.
Does anyone have any questions? Everyone's raising their thumb. They think it's a great idea for another 10 years. There's no other additional questions or concerns?
So right now we're 1 for 10. Is that where we are? 1 in 10?
We are, but we are seeing a significant number of inquiries and the same, a lot of interest for the same or similar type of projects that you're seeing on 6th Avenue. And so if we're going to want to see that same type of development in the same area, the multifamily tax exemption is going to be crucial to the success of those projects.
Starting to finally get some traction on the deal.
Yep.
So, Michael.
Yeah, just a comment. 10 years ago when we started this, or close to it, we're still coming out of the recession. So, it had lag time, and now it's starting to gain traction, and people are recognizing the benefits of this. And it's matching our goals of what we want development wise. It makes sense and incentivize, so that's it. I think 10 more years makes sense, and we'll see it really take off.
So you've got your directions.
Thanks. That's all I have for you tonight. Have a good night. Thanks.
Thanks,
Ryan.
Thanks very much. So next up is our Community Development Block Grant Governance Memorandum of Understanding. And I understand that's going to be Shannon, correct? Yes.
Well, good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council members. I am here tonight to discuss a draft MOU for the Community Development Block Grant Program for 2022 to 2024. So let me share my screen and I'll walk you through what is currently incorporated into the draft. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So just as some background and a reminder, back in July of this year, the Lacey City Council authorized the city manager to enter into an interlocal agreement with Thurston County to continue our participation in the Thurston County Urban County Entitlement Program for the next 3 years, again, 2022 to 2024. Now with this ILA, in past iterations of this program, there's also been a memorandum of understanding that provides the governance structure for the program. So the ILA is required as part of the federal requirements, and then the MOU outlines how the actual program is governed between the entities. So this has typically been between Thurston County, Tumwater, and Lacey. When we were reviewing this back in the summer, the Lacey City Council expressed an interest in having more community development block grant funding go towards affordable housing efforts, not only in Lacey, but also countywide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. We've seen through the past couple of presentations that affordable housing remains one of the most pressing issues in Thurston County, and using community development block grant funding as a tool to help sustain or provide more affordable housing is a possibility. So in the draft MOU, just a couple of highlights that I want to point out is number one, that we would continue with the 3-year cycle between Thurston County, and that's Thurston County and the South cities, the city of Lacey, and that would be in 2023 would be the next year that the city of Lacey would receive funds, and then the city of Tumwater. So every year, each of these entities would be receiving community development block grant funding. Second, Thurston County would continue to administer the program, and as part of that, they would continue to receive 20% of the total community development block grant funds every year for that project administration. After deducting that 20% from the grand total of the community development block grant funding, over a 3-year period per the draft, a minimum of 50% of the remaining community development block grant funds would be allocated to affordable housing efforts. And the allocations are outlined in number 4. So when Thurston County would receive funds, and that would be in 2022, a minimum of 30% would be allocated toward affordable housing. That would include 15% for what we're calling affordable housing efforts. And I'll define these here in just a second. And then 15% for ongoing affordable housing programs. With Lacey and Tumwater, a minimum of 60% of the remaining community development block grant funds would be allocated towards affordable housing efforts, with 40% going to that broad category of affordable housing efforts and 20% for ongoing affordable housing programs. Now, just to provide a little more definition to those two terms, affordable housing efforts, and this list is not intended to be exhaustive, is provided on the green box to the left-hand side. So this would be items like rental unit rehabilitation, homeowner unit rehabilitation, home buyer assistance, providing funding for new housing construction done by a community-based development organization, weatherization rehabilitation, infrastructure and utility improvements that help maintain or expand affordable housing stock, acquisition of property to be used for affordable housing, and then a public service activity that assists low and moderate income persons to obtain or sustain housing. So that's affordable housing efforts. A subcategory of that is the ongoing affordable housing programs. And the goal of this is really to be able to provide consistent funding for programs that operate countywide here in Thurston County. So how this, as drafted in the draft MOU, would work is collectively all of the parties to the MOU, so that would be Thurston County, a representative from the South cities, a representative from the city of Lacey, and Tumwater would provide, would review the ongoing affordable housing program applicants and select applicants that would receive funding throughout the course of the Community Development Block Grant Program. So that would be for 2022, 2023, and 2024. So they're consistently getting affordable housing funding through the duration of that 3-year term. Like I said, it would be a 4-person committee that would determine the recipients, and there would be an opportunity for performance review to ensure that the entities that are receiving funding through this period of time are meeting their goals. And just to go back to this slide really quickly, some good examples of ongoing affordable housing programs, and these are just examples, and it's not intended to be exhaustive either, would be programs the city has funded in the past, such as Home Share. It's a good example, the Critical Home Repair Program with Habitat for Humanity. Those are just 2 examples of ongoing programs that operate here in Lacey, but also operate throughout Thurston County. So just to provide the council with an example, this is a estimate of 1-year funding. So if we were to receive 1.25 million in a year of community development block grant funding, you can see that 250,000 of that goes to Thurston County for administrative costs. And that would be that 20%. And then the remaining costs, which would, in this example, total $1 million, would be able to be used for community development block grant eligible projects. With the MOU in place, what I'm showing here is what that would look like for Thurston County. You can see that affordable housing efforts would have 15% of that remaining funds. So 150,000 would be going to affordable housing efforts. And then 15% would be going to ongoing affordable housing efforts. Again, these are those programs that are running, getting funding between 2022 to 2024. And then the remaining funds, which would be 70% for Thurston County, would be for other community development block grant eligible projects. Now for Lacey and Tumwater, this would be 60% going towards affordable housing efforts after taking into account Thurston County administrative costs. So you can see again that Thurston County administrative costs is $250,000. Affordable housing efforts, there's $400,000. Ongoing affordable housing programs, $200,000, and then remaining community development block grant eligible projects would total $400,000. So collectively, through the 3-year period, the city or all of the jurisdictions would have about $3 million when you take out the administrative costs that would be going to Thurston County, and about 1.5 million of those dollars would be going for affordable housing efforts throughout Thurston County. So that would be 50% of all the community development block grants. So currently, the city is working with Thurston County, Tumwater, Yelm, Tenino, Rainier, and Bucota on finalizing the MOU language. So slight edit to the staff report that was provided to you all as part of this packet. We are not going to be moving forward with considering a memorandum of understanding at the December 16th City Council meeting. We are going to be continuing to work with these parties on finalizing that language. And the intent would be to come back to the City Council sometime in Q1 of 2022 to finalize any MOU. With that, I will stop my screen share. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council might have on this draft MOU language.
Michael. And then Carolyn.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the 30% is 1.25 million, right? What would we as a medium-sized city get in CBGD funding, if we went at it alone? I know as a small, less than 50,000 population, it's 700,000-800,000, right? But as a medium city, if we were by ourselves, what would that funding be if we didn't do the 3-4 year cycle that we're currently in?
Councilmember Stedman, for 2022 to 2024, we have already entered into the interlocal agreement and let the federal government know that we would not be becoming an entitlement community. So for
following that time period, what would it be if we didn't enter in that agreement?
So every year,
if we wouldn't have.
Every year, community development block grant funding is approved by the federal government. And so that funding level can change. So it would be hard to determine what funding could be in 2025 for a city of.
Well, let me phrase this the question a little differently. So a city that's over 50,000 like us right now, who are not in an agreement that we entered into, what do they get this year?
So
$1 million?
that would depend on how the city is made up. There are two formulas in which the federal government provides funding to cities. So depending on, poverty, depending on how density, there's just different things that go into each of those formulas that would determine funds that would be going to cities. So cities of Lacey's size could vary considerably based on, again, what the poverty rates were for the city, overcrowding.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Carolyn's next, and then Lenny.
Let me add to that. I think last time we looked at this, it could be anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000. But as Shannon stated, it's not just the size of the community. That's what makes you eligible. It's really the level of poverty, your housing units, the age, and quite frankly, we actually fare very well in some of those variables that would actually give you more money. And so I think every time we've looked at this, we're right at that cusp of, does it make more sense to be part of the partnership or to be on our own? But and plus, when we're in the partnership, we're not doing the admin oversight of the CDBG dollars. So there is a benefit there also.
So it's probably comparable is what I'm getting at, right? It's probably close to $1 million, maybe plus or minus some, right?
It's close, but we don't have an accurate number for you.
So next up is Councilmember Cox and then Councilmember Greenstein.
Shannon, I was curious when in the part you were describing about having the 4 entities reviewing the funding. Does that envision working with the Regional Housing Council, which does that for virtually all the other housing dollars? Or I was just a little confused about that.
That is correct, Councilmember Cox, and I'm trying to find the exact line in the draft language, but basically it says that the 4-person committee would consider Regional Housing Council priorities.
But they wouldn't necessarily be the group that looks at the other funding priorities that the Regional Housing Council does with grants. We would be establishing a separate multi-jurisdictional team.
Correct, and it's section 5 of the draft language. It reads, affordable housing efforts and ongoing affordable housing allocation shall take into consideration the goals, objectives, programs, and projects developed and approved by the Regional Housing Council. So yes, it would be separate, but certainly would be informed by the Regional Housing Council.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
So Councilmember Greenstein.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First, why are we looking at, why in the MOU is the counties, the year it goes to the county, why are they putting in so much less into affordable housing than Tumwater and Lacey are? The percentage is about half, right? I think it was. So.
Yeah, Councilmember Greenstein, that the ratios that are determined as part of this draft language is in conversation with the county partners and the South cities.
So, but I mean, what's the logic? I'm just trying to understand the logic behind why they would be doing half as much contribution in the year that it's theirs.
So the South counties, use a lot of the funding from community development block grants for large scale infrastructure projects. So they wanted to make sure that they would still have access to opportunities for doing that. And so in conversation with them, they have indicated that 30% is what they would be willing to put aside for affordable housing efforts.
Okay. And then the second part to that question is the 20% fee that the county takes. Is that a reasonable fee? 20%? It seems a bit exorbitant to me.
250,000, right?
So maybe Scott could answer that question. Is that reasonable? You did have a.
I'm looking at the look on his face, and his answer is no. It's not reasonable. What they want.
You're muted.
on mute, Scott.
I love saying that to you.
I will tell you that it's an allowable admin fee. I will say that even though $250,000 obviously pays for staff time and effort, there is a fiduciary responsibility that really extends beyond the 3 years. So That is one thing that we weighed closely when we decided to do the partnership, that we really didn't have the staff resources to take on the federal audits and also the responsibility of carrying that forward. So there is value to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Council Member Stedman.
So let me get this right. So the county is going to run this, but they're going to invest half as much plus a 250,000. I mean, if there's 60,000 per employee that you could hire 4 employees, it's 60,000, right? But they're not going to implement the same level of affordable housing, but they're going to manage it. Wouldn't it make more sense for Lacey to manage it, because we're a higher contributor? And the reason why I bring this up is because not just recent events, but past history with the county managing things. You know, we got the rack that we're left holding the bag, you know, and now it's the regional athletic center should be the Lacey Athletic Center. The SWAT team.
The problem about
that. Matt,
go ahead.
Please let me finish. Okay. I have serious reservations when it comes to the county managing when we do a much better job. Even transportation infrastructure projects, you know, roads, you know, we're just better at it. We could hire employees and do it, but you know, that's just how I feel. You know, I don't know about everybody else.
Well, I think, Scott, explain about the fact that it's under the county's grouping thing.
Well, part of the formation of the urban county, which we're all partners with the exception of Olympia, we are trying to address some of the concerns brought forward by Tenino, Bakota, somewhat Yelm. But in general, and it goes back to what Shannon said, it was a compromise. The reason I'm not putting so much in their initial affordable housing efforts, because they want to make sure they have the flexibility to do infrastructure project that can also help load of moderate income families. And so they're the ones who inform this final agreement. So again, in trying to work together, our overall goal was to make sure that if you look at it in the aggregate, we still have 50% of the total funds coming into the area over a 3-year period for affordable housing. And so from that perspective, that was a win from a Lacey perspective.
And once we've entered into this agreement earlier, we cannot take back administrating it. It's federally, it's under the county's way of dealing with CBDG, correct?
It is. We signed the interlocal agreement and it's under the authority of the county.
Yes. Michael.
For how long? I mean, because when it comes, you know, that ends in what, 4 or 5 years, or that agreement?
2024.
What I'm getting at, yeah, 2024. So, you know, this MOU should probably go to 2024 and we can revisit it then. The reason why I bring this up is because when it comes to, you know, we're at a critical mass here. It's with housing, affordable housing, right? And when you're dealing with this kind of money, there needs to be a process, and we watch the county go through processes that aren't not full outreach, not full input from the public. They're actually having informational stuff and not any input from the residents, and that's concerning. You know, we just went through it with the possible relocation of a homeless encampment. Okay, people have to believe in the process, and if you're doing a limited process, especially when it affects residents outside your jurisdiction, and then the best you can do is schedule a meeting when they have a council meeting, and they expect the citizens to be okay with that process. It's really concerning, is what I'm getting at. And if we're going to have a MOU and there's letter of intents and these partnerships, they have to be met in the middle, not pushed on people. So I have concerns. I think it's a great idea. I think we need to be partners in a lot of things, not just public safety and all this other stuff, but it has to be real partnerships, regardless of who's managing it. And if I don't say nothing, then I'm not doing my due diligence, and I'm not representing the people that feel like they're not being heard. I hope that makes sense, and I apologize if I ruffle anyone's feathers, but I have to, because I'm voted in to represent that.
So we've kind of talked about this quite a bit. I thought we were going to have the proposal, the MOU for the December 16th meeting, but you sounded like you changed that. Is that correct? I just want to clarify.
Correct, Deputy Mayor Pratt. And let me provide a little bit more background on that. So like I said, we are working with the partners, and that includes Thurston County and Tumwater, who traditionally we have entered into the MOU with for the governance of community development block grant funding. But given this new allocation to affordable housing that takes in funds from the South cities, we wanted to make sure that they were part of the MOU. So the county is having them be signatories onto the MOU. So it's just going to take us longer than we originally anticipated to get it back in front of council.
Okay, so we don't have to move this on to the council now. We'll do it later if we do that.
It will come back for council consideration sometime in Q1 of 2022.
Thank you. So I think we've talked about this a lot. Michael, one more statement, keep it short so we can move on, and then Scott. And then we're going to move on because it's getting late.
I'm good, Deputy Mayor. I just never lowered my hand. That's
Okay.
it.
Just one final thought too. Typically, when we would do an interlocal agreement of the 3-year period, we wouldn't have any sort of parameters or goals that would say you have to do affordable housing. So I want to at least recognize Shannon's efforts to, when we negotiated this with the rest of the jurisdictions, that was in a sense, an achievement to actually get that in there. Otherwise, it would just be wide open. People would do senior centers, or other things that qualify under CDBG. And so it's trying to recognize the fact that we do have affordable housing crisis, and we're trying to leverage the CDBG dollars that we do have to actually do some good. So there is merit in trying to get that done. And then again, we just got to go through the process. If when 2024 rolls around, we will revisit this issue and decide if we want to continue the regional partnership or if we want to go individually.
Okay. Malcolm. You're on mute.
I remember back when we were trying to figure out if we were going to go on our own or as part of a collective, and the different modes and modules and variables that they use to say how much you're going to get and all the stuff like that. And we tasked Shannon and Scott with figuring out what was the best path forward for the city. And I honestly believe that you guys have done what was asked and found the best path forward for the city. I'm not sure that I agree with 20% as a fee to do the work. I don't know exactly what those full-time hours are cost at, and I don't. But unless or until they build in some type of a billing schedule for these projects, and you have to define what you're working on during the day and bill for that, then our hands are tied and we have to pay the 20%. That's just the way it goes right now, unless or until that changes. I hope in the future that changes. But I know you guys have done what's in our best interest, and I'm looking forward to being able to say, hey, let's go. I'm not looking forward to paying 20%, but I do understand that we're getting more dollars. But it also seems like, and historically, that even though we're going to get more dollars, we may get less work because of how this thing is structured. So possibly in the future, we will be on our own. But for now, we are in this, and we're going to have to do the best we can with it.
Thank you. So we are 18 minutes over our schedule, and we have 2 more things. So I'm going to push us to go on, if that's okay. And the next step is temporary procedures, council meeting times, and hybrid meetings. Scott.
Well, I'm sure this will not be a long discussion. So as council knows, we've talked from time to time about at what point do we go back into, I'll say, open session, for lack of a better description. I've had an opportunity to talk with some of you individually, and does it make sense to do the first meeting in January? So I guess there's, maybe that's the first thing to discuss. So there's two issues I want to bring before you. One is, do you want to meet in person? Now, I want to couch that in the fact that we would still provide a virtual/hybrid option. So if those that chose to continue to do virtual for personal reasons, then that option would be available as it would be available for the public. We have looked at the setup of the council chambers. We'd be looking at possibly using the full dais and doing a 6-foot distancing, and also use the director's table to accommodate the spacing for council. And myself and Dave would probably be the only staff present within the room. And then we would just schedule directors or other staff as needed when they have a presentation. So that would be one issue. A second issue, which is equally important, is the fact that we're going into a new year. And as you know, the temporary procedures to suspend certain rules has put our city council meetings at 7 o'clock as well as our, at 4 o'clock as well as our work sessions. In talking with Council elect Vasquez, she had mentioned the fact that she does have a ongoing job, and that 6 o'clock would probably be a better time for her to meet her commitments as a council member. So there's really kind of two questions before you. Is council interested in adjusting the time, since we've been meeting at 4 o'clock here for about the last 20 months? That'd be one issue before council. And then second issue, if you're willing to meet in an open format, and what is the desire of council? So with that, I'll answer your questions.
I saw Lenny's hand go up first, and then Ed's, and then Michael's.
So my recommendation would be first meeting of the new year, we go back to in a public meeting, an open public meeting with the hybrid model, and we go to 6 o'clock for the meetings.
Ed?
Ditto.
Michael?
Yeah, I think last time we discussed this was 3 or 4 months ago, and I had reservations because it was upcoming flu season, Omicron or whatever you call it is, it came out, but we all know what to do now. We know our practices, wash your hands, wear a mask, that kind of stuff. So I'm comfortable as long as it's hybrid and it satisfies people that are concerned with still being able to make a meeting without being physically there.
So I have a suggestion, and I know it's probably not will be well received, probably not at all, but what about everyone that meets in person that is vaccinated, and those that don't go in as a hybrid? You would have to show your vaccination card.
I would object to that. There is no law. There is no procedure for that. There's no requirement for that.
Other council
I would
members
suggest,
are doing that.
other counties are doing their thing, we're doing our thing. And I see that as discriminatory.
I would add to be in a public meeting setting, we would all wear masks regardless if you're speaking or not. So you'd have masks on all times. Same thing with the public. If they went to the podium to address council, they'd also be wearing a mask. And we would arrange the public's chairs also 6 feet apart. And we believe we can get close to about 30 in capacity if we did that arrangement.
Scott, when are we looking to do this?
So this would be your first meeting, January 6th. It's also somewhat of a meeting too for those that have been reelected. We would do the ceremony in terms of swearing in. And so that would be that meeting.
Also, mayor, deputy mayor, and new council members. Robin would get sworn in at that meeting as well, right?
That's correct.
What about time?
6.
Is everybody good with 6?
Is there thumbs up on that? Good. Okay.
Did the mayor express any concerns about 6, or is he in favor of that? Have you talked to him about it?
But I think there's always an understanding that, right now we have a very unique council where you have more flexible schedules, but when we have future councils that have work obligations, that we need to be mindful of that. So that would make sense to do a compromise at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
I'll just add that this meeting right now is just providing guidance for Scott and myself we'd prepare an ordinance and appropriate legislative documents for the council's consideration next Thursday.
Councilmember Cox.
I'm willing to give it a try, but I think we need to be mindful of what happened in Olympia, where they went to public meetings only to have the Delta variant really flare up and they had to retreat. And so I think if we are going to go into this, we need to build in some sort of proviso that if we have to make a change, here's what we'll do, so that we have that option. Because I mean, I'm as sick as anybody else is of meeting by Zoom, and dearly love to be back in City Hall. But I think safety first. That always has to be, protecting each other's health and the public's health has to come first.
Councilmember Kunkel.
I have no issue at all of being safe and being careful and being practical about open public meetings. My biggest concern is, for the longest time now, we have been isolated from the public. We have a job to do. Our job is to represent the public and be available for the public. That comes with the territory. So we need to make those kinds of arrangements. We need to be flexible so that we can do our jobs and represent the public as what we're supposed to be doing. I am in favor of public meetings, and if we want to social distance and put masks on, so be it. Let's do it.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to add, and I'll work with the city attorney. I think Councilmember Cox does bring up a good point. I mean, this whole health environment that we've been basically living in does change from time to time. So if something does necessitate a retreat, if you will, to go back to a virtual environment, we could basically look at the temporary procedures and at least maybe have a nod if that does in fact happen in the future. But
Agreed.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah. But this also gives you the flexibility to decide whether you want to go to the meeting or not. So it respects everybody, if you ask me.
Yeah, agreed. The hybrid model respects everybody. Everybody has an option.
Well, one of the things it does help is many of you travel, and it does allow being at the council if you have to be in Boston, for instance, or something. So speaking of,
right where I'm sitting right now.
Yes.
In a hotel room in Boston.
So, okay, so is everybody comfortable with that? Let's just have kind of thumbs up of them doing some kind of an ordinance thing or resolution. Okay, great.
So just quickly, procedurally, you'll see something next council meeting to address your wishes. And again, I'll be working with Dave to accomplish that task.
Okay, so next up is our very, very last thing is this adding an amendment. Well, not adding an amendment, that's my notes. Adding a potential new position.
So one thing I'm very cognizant of the fact as your city manager is that obviously if there is not budget authority, it needs to go back before council for authorization. So that goes to when we exceed the budget. If we think we're going to, then we go back for an amendment. It also, at least in my opinion, applies to the number of employees that we have within the budget that have been identified. So as you know, we have 303 FTEs identified in the budget. Unfortunately, and there's some things that we can't control. I have an employee within our HR department that is going to be out indefinitely, and I don't have a good timeline of when that employee is going to be back. And I really cannot afford to lose even 1,000 or 2,080 hours. And so what I'm getting just a nod from council, if it's okay for the city manager to hire another HR analyst to ensure that we can continue with the recruitment of the 13 employees we've identified in the budget for 2022, but also to continue to deal with the vacancies that we currently have too, which are right now they stand probably about between 8 and 15.
So you need another HR analyst.
We do, to basically recognize the fact that the current one is not going to be able to contribute at this time.
But what's the pay schedule on that? Do you know?
Yeah, so from a cost perspective, the salary is around 65,000 would be an average. I would just say it's probably going to be between, let's say $95,000 for salary and benefits.
Total cost.
So Scott, is this adding a new position, or is this more like a backfill to cover an existing position that would be a temporary?
So what we would do is probably make this a limited term employee. So it'd be a 2-year term. And then once we have a clear picture what's going to happen with the current employee, then we would act accordingly.
Okay.
So
So it's
would
not-
this put us at 304 or are we still at 303?
It would, from a budgetary standpoint, it would put us at 304. That's why I'm coming to council and just being
Gotcha.
very transparent.
Make it happen.
Do you need a motion or?
No, I guess as long as I got the head nods, and then you'll see this from a finance committee standpoint, you'll start seeing these amendments go through, and then we'll formalize it next year. And I was joking with Councilmember Stedman earlier that I feel like he jinxed it because we passed the budget last Thursday. And he said it's already changed. And so
Already old.
he predicted the future.
I told you, all things are his fault.
So that seems, everyone seems comfortable with that, I think, from the way I understand. So that seems to be putting us at the end of our agenda. We're only 15 minutes over. We did better than I thought. Yay.
Great.
So have a nice rest of your week, and I will close the meeting. Bye.
Thank you, council.
Right.
Take care.